Hello, this is Emmanuel with Domu Property Management. The topic for today's conversation is how do you keep your tenants, right? Like once you have your tenants in place, how do you make sure you can minimize vacancies? The number one cost for a lot of landlords is going to be the turnover cost of preparing a unit between tenants, and obviously the leasing cost, which is what you pay professionals to find you a tenant. So once you really put a tenant in there, it would be ideal for you if they're going to stay in there for as long as possible while keeping the best care of your property. So we thought we would just kind of touch on this topic and give you a list of things that you can do to just make sure that once you have found the perfect tenant, that you get to keep them for as long as possible. So the number one thing that we recommend always, whatever the property is empty or whatever the property is occupied, is that you keep the property clean. So whatever you are responsible for as the landlord, make sure that you keep the property clean. So if you have a small multifamily or a type of property where you are responsible for the common areas and the exterior of the building, just make sure that the place is clean so that the people feel welcome when they come home, and so they're also happy to have family over, friends over. They're not embarrassed about where they leave. Number two is once you have a request for a repair, just make sure that you over communicate and that you respond in a timely manner. One of the worst things that can happen for a tenant is that they're having some type of problem with your property, and you're not being responsive, you're not communicating with them, and they really just don't feel that you take care of them, which is going to make it very difficult then at the end of the month when you are expecting your rent. If you haven't been timely with the repairs, it's just going to start making that relationship a little difficult. Another great point about, especially if you have a large multifamily property, is really take care of maintaining the exterior of the building. So really make sure that if there are some major maintenance that needs to be done, that's taken care of. But also make sure that you're doing that preventive maintenance. Does the building need to be repainted? Do the stairs need to be repainted? Is there a bunch of mold growing on the outside of the building that you just need to kind of pressure wash? That's very popular down here in Florida, being so humid, being that it rains all the time. And if that's left not taken care of, will really make your property not look as nice, which in the long term will become a problem, because once again, going back to topic number one, if the property is not clean, the tenants may not be as happy to live there. Tip number 5 is really just be very knowledgeable about your market and your rents. Like, what are you asking for rent versus what's out there on the market? A lot of the times I see this being a problem with people that have inherited a property with tenants, or they've just taken over a property, and they can get people to stay for more than 1 year. And the reason a lot of times is you may be able to find somebody for 1 year, and they may be in a crunch for time, and they may commit to a rental that is maybe a little bit more than market just because they need to. But if you've seen that you can keep your tenants for more than a year, really just analyze what you're asking for rent and what the perceived exchange of rent for value is. Number 6, once you have those good tenants, reward them, right? Be mindful of the fact that they always pay on time, they don't make any noise. So maybe at the end of year 1, at the end of year 2, they're great tenants, they've always paid on time. Instead of raising the rent on them, is it worth it for you to instead keep them happy and not raise the rent over and over, by just kind of like rewarding their behavior? As you know, they're being great tenants, and it's always better to keep a great tenant than lose one over a couple percentages increase in rent that don't really add up to the bottom line as much as the cost of turnover a unit and losing a great tenant actually are. Another thing, it's becoming very competitive for multifamily properties, and they do offer, especially a lot of the new buildings, do offer a lot of amenities. So be mindful of, once again, what's around you and what type of amenities are offered, and see how you can compete. So if you have a building that doesn't have a washer and dryer, in the unit, maybe consider putting one in the common area. Or if you have a building that has very old washers and dryers, just maybe consider investing in a new washer and dryer so that the tenants see that you continue to put money in the property and that you care about the quality of their living situation. Another great incentive for tenants is to either incentivize tenants that have been good tenants by giving them maybe like sign up for another 12, 18 month lease and get the first month free. Or another way you can incentivize tenants is by including some of the utilities that they pay, especially on a multifamily property. If you were able to negotiate contracts with, for example, your cable company or your Wi-Fi company, and you can pass on those rates that are negotiated directly to your tenant instead of charging them for it or making them still pay for those utilities, that will go in a long way when they're evaluating whether or not to extend for another year or not. One of the final tips is to really be aware of where your property is, what type of neighborhood your property is in, and if you know that your property is not in the greatest neighborhoods and it is common for people not to feel safe there, instead of avoiding conversation, just be very upfront with it and see like how can you make your property more comfortable, or how can you make your tenants feel more safe in your property by maybe investing in some security cameras or some security lights. So those little things, but again, really make people feel that you think about the well-being of them and their families. And then that leads into right to the last topic, which I know could be a little controversial for some landlords out there, but I'm a big believer, at Domu Property Management, we're big believers that real estate is a people's business. So you really want to get to know your tenants, and that's not to confuse yourself with becoming overly nice or overly lenient with them. It's still that landlord-tenant relationship, but really get to know people, really get to know what they're going through, what their situation is, what their needs are, so they can really feel that, once again, you care about them, you take care of them, and they would love to stay there, because it's very difficult to actually find a landlord that actually cares, but you could be that landlord for them. So once again, this is Emmanuel from Domu Property Management. This was just a quick blog post on how to reduce your vacancy. Once again, biggest cost for real estate is those turnovers and the vacancy cost and the leasing fee. So this was just a quick thing that we went through, just a couple topics on at least how we ensure that we keep our tenants for as long as we can. Once again, Emmanuel, Domu Property Management. We hope this was useful. Thank you.